Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and today we are once again cooperating with Chords. We're talking about fretboards today, and I'm going to show you some basics for the fretboards in Finale. And actually, in order to see the fretboards themselves, we do have to go to the chord tool and into the chord menu and make sure that Show Fretboards is checked. By default, this will be unchecked, and until this is checked, you won't see any fretboards. So once you check that, now you see all the fretboards and all the chord symbols. And what you notice here is that now each chord symbol has two different handles. And these handles can be moved in separate or parallel ways. So if you grab the handle for the chord symbol itself, you can see that the chord will move parallel with the fretboards. Or if you grab the fretboard handle individually, you can actually move the fretboards away from the chord symbol, whichever way you need to go. So there's two handles for that. However, oops, go back there. However, the chords are linked, so it's not like there's separate chord symbols here. In fact, if you go into the chord definition dialog box for the symbol or the fretboard, it doesn't matter. You're going to the same chord definition. They're essentially the same chord. Finale considers it all one unit. Now, with fretboards, what we're dealing with is the top section here where it says fretboards, and it works somewhat similarly to the suffix where you have this suffix ID, and you also have a fretboard ID. The reason for this is that Finale gives you a few other options. In fact, if you press the select button, you'll get the fretboard selection dialog box, which is somewhat similar to the suffix dialog selection box. And it allows you to choose some alternate fretboard diagrams for that G major chord in this particular case. More specifically, the way that Finale handles this is that these fretboard diagrams are actually part of a fretboard group. And you'll see here where it says fretboard selection :G, which means that this is the fretboard from this fretboard group for the simple major triad. You can see it right underneath the fretboard ID here for the standard guitar. A little bit more about this in the next video, but just to show you what's going on, if you press the Edit button to show this this fretboard editor for this G major chord, it's actually one fretboard diagram in a group of 12. As you can see here, there's one for every pitch. And much more about this in the next video and how to use this fretboard editor, because we can create our own custom fretboards. Eventually, we can, again, it works similar to the suffix editor where you can duplicate, copy, create your own. You can change the order of these when you need to, etc. So it's very similar. The couple things that are not similar is that you can't actually have a 0 ID here. It's not going to let me actually hide the fretboard that way. Of course, we can always hide the fretboard by unchecking it here. But with the suffix, you can have an ID of 0, which is just telling you that you have a G chord without a suffix, which makes sense. But every chord has to have a fretboard ID. You don't have to show it, but it has to have a fretboard ID. Now, by default, when you type a chord in, Finale will choose a fretboard ID 1 for you from that particular chord. And every single chord and every single suffix has its own set of fretboards, its own fretboard group. So actually, if I were to go into the A minor 7 chord here, you'll see that this has a minor 7 standard guitar. That's the fretboard group being used for the A minor 7. Now, all of these fretboard groups all of these suffixes rather, don't have multiple fretboard groups. As you can see, the minor 7 only has one set of fretboard groups for that minor 7 suffix. Some suffixes, I think this one, number 9, the major 7, sharp 9, some of them are blank. You can see that the fretboard here is blank, so the fretboard groups are not complete for all of the suffixes. However, this one is weird in particular because there is one that exists for C major, but not any one that exists for any of the other pitches. So this is sort of an incomplete fretboard group for that particular suffix. Other suffixes, if you create a suffix from scratch, like I have in the bottom here, I've created some brand new suffixes. They, by default, they won't have any fretboard groups available to you yet. So you'll have to do something, which I'll show you. Again, I'll show you how to create these later on. But let's see, what was that? That was minor 7. It doesn't matter. Make that a 6 chord. Yeah, most of the suffixes will have only one set of fretboard groups. Occasionally, some of them will have two or three or four, as the major chords actually have four IDs, as you can see. Now, something that's interesting about typing chords into Finale with the fretboard groups is that if you happen to know the fretboard ID, you can access that fretboard ID directly by typing the chord into Finale in a specific way. So in this case, if I type the chord, and I could type the suffix here too if I want to, but in this case I'm just going to type a G major chord. And very similar to using the colon and a number to pull up the correct suffix, we can do that with the fretboard ID as well. And the way to do this is just type colon, lowercase f, and then a number. So colon F2 will give me the second fretboard ID for that G major chord. So now you can see when I go into the definition that I'm using the second ID. And if you know that there's three or four, you could do G colon F4, and you'll get the fourth fretboard group. The one thing that's not similar to suffixes in this regard is that you can't type F0. That will just give you the first fretboard, or the fretboard ID number 1. So that won't, unfortunately, pull up this dialog box, which you think it would, but it doesn't. All right, so that's, again, that's colon, lowercase f, and then the number of the fretboard ID that you want. Now, another thing to know about these fretboard groups is that out of the box with Finale, Finale only provides you with fretboards for the standard guitar with standard tuning and everything. There is no other, preset fretboards. However, I'm going to show you how to do this in the next video. There are all these instruments available to you, and actually we can create instruments, fretted instruments, custom fretted instruments, and use fretboard diagrams on those custom instruments or any of these preset instruments. So ultimately what you can do is create a set of ukulele fretboards if you want, and you'll see that now it has 4 strings. So anyway, I'm going to get into this a lot in the next video, but just to point out that it is possible to do this. However, out of the box, Finale is only providing you with fretboards for the standard tuning of a guitar. So let's talk about what's below this fretboard ID situation here. We have the option for style. Now there are several styles that come out of the box with Finale. The Seville styles, a couple of alterations of that, a wide style, and 2 different jazz styles. Now these different styles will actually show you, will have different characteristics of the fretboard itself. So if you choose a different style for a given fretboard, Jazz 2 in this case, you can see that it looks a little bit different. It looks a little bit more handwritten. All right, so, and as you can see, you can do this individually if you want, although I don't know why you'd necessarily want to do that, but each fretboard can have its own style if you really want to. But we can also change them all at once using the utilities change chords. So utilities change chords, and at the bottom we can choose to set a different style for all of the fretboards. Jazz 2 there. All right. Now, however, if you enter a new chord, it will revert to the original style, and the reason for that is because that Seville style is actually set as a default. If you really want to have the Jazz 2 be the default chord fretboard diagram, choose it here in the fretboard style. What I'm doing is going to Edit Styles. I'm choosing Jazz 2. Again, this whole dialog box is another video that's coming up, so I'll show you how to deal with all this stuff. But just choose the Jazz 2 here, and then choose Set as Default. And once you do that, it will convert that chord itself to the Jazz chord, but then when you enter a new one, it will start using that Jazz 2 as a default fretboard style. Again, those it looks forward, so if you change the style, it's only going to change the ones going forward. It's not going to retroactively change all of the fretboards that exist. So if you set the default to something else, you also have to go back and reset all of the existing fretboard diagrams to that style. And then one more thing I want to talk about in regards to fretboards. At the bottom of the chord definition dialog box, all the way at the bottom here, there is this option for Use Fretboard Font. And this is sort of a throwback to the old way that Finale used to deal with fretboards. Fretboards in the old versions of Finale were simply characters from a font. So if you check this, all of this grays out, and so you're ignoring all of the all the business with the ID and being able to create your custom fretboards. Now you're bound to a preset set of fretboard diagrams that exist as font characters in the Seville font in this case. And you click OK, and it does mess with the spacing of this, so this is always a problem. You can individually sort of change the change the position of the fretboard if you need to, and also you can sort of change the baseline for the fretboard separately, which I'm going to show you later. But as you can see, this is it's still a fretboard. It looks similar to the other Seville style fretboard. Actually, if I just quickly go back to Seville here. It looks pretty much the same. It's a little bit different, but it's fairly similar. Again, what's going on here is that this is an actual character from a font set. So just to illustrate this, what I've done is set up an expression that has these in there. So you can take a look at this. And literally, these are just characters that I typed with a letter. And actually, if we go into text, insert, symbol, you'll be able to see the entire font set for the Seville font here. And as you can see, all of these chord diagrams, the thing about this is that these are not customizable. You choose one and that's it. So there's sort of a limit to how many you can actually have. Oh, and there's a nice little electric guitar player there. That's interesting that you can use if you want. But again, like, the capital E is this one, although that looks like an E minor chord, so that's just, I don't know why they did that. But anyway, so you're sort of limiting yourself to this preset list of fretboard diagrams, which is, at the end of the day, not all that extensive, which is probably why Finale eventually went to this new system of the fretboard editor and using all this stuff. So, the fretboard font thing is an old thing in Finale. If you have some old files, you might need to be using that. But otherwise, there's really no reason to use that. And of course, we can access that with the utilities change chords as well. We can change all of these to actually use the fretboard font in this bottom option if we just check that. And of course, it will screw up the spacing, which you'll have to deal with. But that's how that works. All right, so I think that's, the basics of fretboards. Hopefully this has helped. The meat and potatoes of this is really being able to create your own fretboard diagram. So come back for the next video, and we're going to dive into that. And I look forward to that. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon on the next video.